Hi everyone and welcome to Wild Earth Ways. I'm Kat and in today's video I'm doing a VR to a tarot tag called Tarospection 10, which was created by Soul Shadow Museum, and in her video she created 10 really great questions about our relationship with the tarot. And I've really enjoyed watching her video and the different VRs to it. And recently the VR done by Marine at the Waves of Your Soul, I really loved her responses to these questions and it inspired me to have a go at answering them myself. So I'm going to dive right in with the first question, which is, if your tarot journey were a book, which card would be the cover art and why? So for this, I've actually chosen the Queen of Wands from the Tarot of the Abyss. So this is the Queen of Wands in the Tarot of the Abyss by Anna Turian. It's a little bit presumptuous to choose this card because it's really gorgeous. But the reason I've chosen it is because I feel it represents well how tarot works for me as a tool, how it feels to me to use tarot. So you can see here that the woman is cross-legged on the ground. She's very grounded and she's very focused. You can see this light from her brow coming out, which is suggesting kind of understanding and focus. And between her hands, she has a fire spirit, and she's using this to create the fire from the sticks in front of her. And for me, this shows how tarot is a tool for bringing focus. And this can be to help bring a new perspective, a new understanding, to gain insight into a situation, or to focus in on an aspect of your life that you want to bring focus to. And it's also a very creative tool. So I find tarot very inspiring for storytelling, for poetry, and for generally taking a more creative, surprising approach to life. And so I try to see tarot as something from which I use to focus my thoughts and bring something new or create something from that experience. And so I hope with this image to represent how I want this tarot practice to feel. Also that it feels illuminating, it feels grounding. We're able to come into focus and use it as a tool to nurture creativity and clarity. So that is my slightly aspirational image for how I see my tarot journey. Now, the next question was, if you could mix two tarot decks together to make your ultimate hybrid deck, which decks would you choose? And this was very, very difficult for me. So I'm actually going to stick with the Tarot of the Abyss here because I love in this deck, I love the art style and the way in which the images tell stories so evocatively. I like the humanity of this deck, the way in which we really see these characters and their narratives unfolding. And so I thought, okay, I could combine this with something like the Witch's Wisdom, which is a very nature-focused deck, and so have a hybrid deck of kind of human storytelling with a very strong nature theme, a nature presence in the deck. And this would be my ultimate hybrid. It was difficult for me to even think about this because I love the decks as they are. I don't really want to change the decks which I work with and that I've chosen to be sort of part of my collection. But I thought, yeah, I would have a kind of human storytelling, nature-based deck. And then I realized, well, actually that deck already exists. I already have a deck like that. And that deck is my Shadowscapes. So the Shadowscapes Tarot by Stephanie Law, I feel it actually does that job of combining storytelling and a very strong nature-based presence. So we have the human and fae-like figures in natural environments, in natural settings, interacting with nature intimately and in a way that gives us insight into their experience and our experiences as well, the narratives of our lives that are unfolding. So I think that my ultimate hybrid deck already exists. It's this one, the Shadowscapes, which tells stories and gives us a kind of a beautiful natural environment to step into. Now the next question is there a tarot deck that you weren't really feeling at first, but it kind of grew on you, and what changed your mind? So this is a deck I've spoken about a bit recently. It's the Pagan Otherworlds Tarot by Uzi, which at first, when I first got this deck, I was worried I had possibly made a mistake because it's got this kind of somewhat cold, detached energy about it, and because it has a certain seriousness. I chose this deck because I love the minors. I love the openness of these scenes that you feel that you can just step into. I also think the artwork is beautiful, but when I first got it, I just wasn't sure how to use it. I felt somewhat intimidated by it, and I've made a video recently about how I changed my approach with this deck and have come to really enjoy using it, and that is to use it as a storytelling deck. So just drawing one card at a time, and I've been doing that in combination with the Citadel Oracle deck and using that draw to inspire storytelling. And that's the only way I've really used this deck so far. I haven't used it in personal readings, but I think I could now do that. Like now I have actually got to know the deck and feel comfortable using the deck. I could also use this one in personal readings, but it's really the using it as a creative inspiration tool that has helped me to understand this deck and to begin to step into it. So that's the Pagan Otherworlds by Uzi. Now the next question is, if you could actually step into the world of any tarot card for a day, which card would you dive into? And I have chosen for this the Smoke, Ash and Embers, and specifically the Sun card in the Smoke, Ash and Embers. I think I could have chosen many cards in this deck. This is the deck I decided to dive into, and specifically this Sun card, which has this wonderful warm illuminated energy. Now decks that I would like to dive into their world, for sure I would choose the Shadowscapes deck. That's the first one that came to mind for me. But then I thought, well, if I could just dive into this world for one day, I could have a completely different experience and be a dragon for a day, then I'm going to choose that. I would like to experience something so completely different, being a dragon in this world. And that's really the draw of this deck, isn't it? That you can step into a world where dragons and magic are real, and it's actually not that intimidating of a world either. The Smoke, Ash and Embers has a kind of gentle quality that makes it not seem too terrifying to step into being a dragon for a day. You can see in this Sun card, for example, that the dragon is basking in the sunshine, under the trees, among the butterflies. They're not huge, fearsome dragons, but they do have that amazing, creative, magical energy that we have in dragons. So for me, dragons really represent the power of creation in the world, the aspects of change, how the elements are combining and recombining in different ways to create endless change in the world. And of course, dragons are associated with all those fantasy stories and magical worlds. So when I was thinking about it, I remembered this essay by J.R.R. Tolkien called On Fairy Stories, where he writes about different kinds of fairy stories and what they mean to the general public and what they mean to him. And he specifically writes about dragons, that in whatever world he had his being, it was another world. That's the dragon. Fantasy, the making or glimpsing of other worlds, was the heart of the desire of fairy. I desired dragons with a profound desire. He's talking of himself as a boy and how he longed for these dragons. And that sentence, I love that. It really resonates with me. I desired dragons with a profound desire. Of course, I in my timid body did not wish to have them in the neighborhood, intruding into my relatively safe world, in which it was, for instance, possible to read stories in peace of mind, free from fear. But the world that contained even the imagination of Fafnir was richer and more beautiful, at whatever cost of peril. The dweller in the quiet and fertile plains may hear of the tormented hills and the unharvested sea, and long for them in his heart, for the heart is hard, though the body be soft. It's a wonderful sentiment. It makes a lot of sense about his longing for this fantasy world, even if he doesn't really want to live it in reality, because the heart can long for it. The heart can long for these magical, passionate experiences, even if we actually choose physical comfort most of the time, to be comfortable, to be at ease in our modern world, in our modern homes and so on. So I kind of agree with him and I kind of don't, because I think I would love to step into this world, and certainly if I had the chance to step into it for a day and then return, then it would be dragons. I feel like as this dragon in the Sun card, you're really experiencing oneness with the creative powers of the solar system, of the planet, and feeling that in your heart, in your body. That's what dragon energy means to me and how I read this card. So I'm choosing the Sun card from Smoke, Ash and Embers. The next question is, in your tarot readings, which card do you find to be the most changeable and versatile to interpret? And for this one, I'm choosing the Moon card. So the Moon card for me is very changeable. It's actually quite challenging to interpret. That's partially because it means different things in different contexts. So it's already a strange image. This is the universal weight. It's based obviously on the imagery of the Waite-Smith tarot deck. And you can see how odd this image is, with this blue lobster crawling out of the water. We have this dog and wolf howling at this sun with the moon hidden within it, and these two towers in the distance, and this path leading up into the mountains with these golden raindrops or yods falling from the sky. So we can interpret this card as referring to delusion, to dreams, to insanity. It can refer to a dark night of the soul, and it can also refer to intuition, inspiration, poetry, authenticity, coming into your true self. So you can see that it has a very strong range of meanings. And for me, I feel that that's because the moon itself is changeable. So the moon is sometimes, every night we're going to see the moon in a different shape in the sky and at different times as well. So the moon's energy is inherently changeable and versatile. And that line that we walk between dreams, intuition, authenticity and delusion and being misled is a fine one. And I think that that's what's so interesting about the moon card and why it shows up differently in different readings depending on the context. I myself like the moon card a lot. I'm a fan of its meanings and diving deep into intuition and exploring the wild and the wild self and ideas around truth. If we imagine stepping into this image, there's a clear path to take, and so it kind of forms a logical progression on from the Star card, the previous card, in which we have a landscape which is pathless. So it's a way of bringing this lessons of that we've learned in the Star card, of healing, of reintegration, of authenticity, of nurturing, back through this pathway into the world, into our interactions with others, into our lived experience. So the moon card is very versatile to interpret, but it's very fascinating to interpret as well. So I do enjoy this card. Now the next prompt is a card that possesses qualities you admire but find challenging to apply in your real life. And for me, this was a very obvious choice. I'm sticking with the Universal Weight deck, and that card is the Emperor. Now, actually, I like the Emperor card. He represents concepts of order, of discipline, of power, and of authority. And in a fairly chaotic world, I feel that we often need those qualities of order. However, we can see the negative implied also in this card with that kind of desertified background. The landscape has been sucked dry. There's no longer anything living in this landscape. And this stone throne is also rather austere and intimidating. But the Emperor is someone who is ready to protect his people. We have this armor here on his legs and feet. So he has positive qualities. And this energy is one that is useful in real life. Sometimes we need to protect ourselves, our boundaries. We also need to protect the people we love. We need to protect the world, the earth. And how can we do that? Now, I think that the problem with the Emperor card is where he's seeking to assert power over people. But power in itself can be positive. In a more like a mundane daily sense, I think this kind of authority is something which I find very difficult to access. So I feel it quite easy to associate with this card, with the Empress, who also has her own kind of power, but her power is very much in nurturing, in supporting people, in creativity. And obviously this card is very much aligned with feminine energies, whereas this is aligned with masculine energies. Now, most of the time I'm very happy and comfortable being here. This makes sense to me. I also feel like strongly connected with all of the queens in the tarot for the same reason. But there are times when this would be helpful. You know, there are certain interactions where having that kind of authority would be useful. So when I, for example, walk into the classroom in the first lesson of the semester, having that kind of emperor authority would no doubt be helpful. That can sometimes be a little difficult or challenging for me to access. So that is something which I have thought about a lot through the tool of the tarot. Question is, if you could add a major arcana card to the tarot, which card would you choose to create? And this is a really good question, and it's very challenging because I do see the major arcana as a kind of system, a narrative, which is complete in itself. It's difficult for me to think how I would interrupt it, what I'm going to add into this system. There are tarot decks which include these extra cards, and I never find that to be all that useful. They always seem to me to remain outside of the major arcana as I understand it. But I have tried to answer this question. So the card which I'm going to add into the major arcana is the Forest. So this is actually a card from the Wild Unknown Archetypes deck by Kim Krans. And in that deck, there are many cards which I think would be interesting additions. I've chosen the Forest. So looking at the major arcana, most, although not all, of the cards are people or personifications. There isn't really a landscape card. I did actually think about choosing, instead of the forest, choosing the ocean, but that energy does, for me, seem to be represented by the moon card. And the forest has some specific meanings for me, which I think would be interesting to try to include in the major arcana. So the forest is, above all, is an ecosystem. It's a landscape in which life is supporting life. We have the trees, we have the species who interact with one another in symbiotic relationships. We can think of the fungi on the roots of the trees, the mycorrhizae, which are forming these networks of communication and mutual support among the trees, and the different species living in the soil and in the plants. And then the ways in which the trees are interacting with the air, with the atmosphere, with the weather systems. The forest is a life-sustaining system. And for me, to some extent, this is also how I see the world card. So here in the Shadowscapes world card, I think it's something we can appreciate. But the forest also has some other aspects which I don't see in the world card. So the forest also represents adventure. It's a place in which we go on a quest. to go on an adventure and to encounter mystery. So when you go into a forest, you can't see all that far ahead. You are always uncertain of what's coming next, what may be coming from around the corner. The forest is very resonant for humans in like fairy stories. The concept of going into the dark wood is one that we often meet in fairy stories, and for good reason, because it's a place where people are tested. It's a place where people come into their true self and experience adventure and quest. And so for that reason, I think it would be fun to include a forest card. And I think my categories, so I'm glad I've chosen the forest. The next question is to share a card that represents your current life mantra. Okay, my cat has now left the frame, so I'll have a go at sharing that again. So the next one is to share a card that represents your current life mantra. And I've chosen for this one the love card from the Witch's Wisdom. So the message is really very simple. It's to be love, to approach life with open-heartedness, to look with the eyes of love. There's an amazing interview with James Baldwin in which he says, what you are looking at is also you. So he says that, when we meet different people in the street, they could be you could be them. So the idea is to love truly the world as we move through it. And I think that that's a mantra which I would like to remember, is to bring love to every step, to bring love to every breath and word, to be open-hearted to life, and that this would bring more peace, more happiness. It's a simple, I know it's a cliche, it's a super familiar hippie kind of message, but that's the one that I'm choosing to choose as a mantra today, which is simply love. Now the next question is, if you could invite 3 cards for dinner at your table, which ones would you pick? And I'm going to invite, first of all, the King and Queen of Cups. So this is from the Bianco Nero Tarot by Marco Proieto. And I'm choosing the King and Queen of Cups to come to my dinner party because I think they would be great company. Both of them are going to be great communicators. With them, you can have a really soulful, rich conversation. They're going to pick up on people's emotions. They're going to make people feel at ease and bring the best out of people. And I personally, I like I like deep and soulful conversations and real connections with people. I'm not much of a one for small talk, so I think that this couple is going to be a great couple to have at a dinner party. But, to keep things a little bit real and so we don't get carried away with emotions, I'm also going to invite the Queen of Swords. I love the Queen of Swords in this deck. She's going to bring the energy of like accuracy and clarity. She's going to make some great intellectual conversations, I think, and really be seeking for truth in the situation. So I would really enjoy to hear the conversation and join the conversation between the Queen of Swords, the King of Cups, and the Queen of Cups. And to complete my dinner party, I'm afraid I'm not going to stick to 3. I'm going to also have the Hermit come. If he's willing to come, then I would love the Hermit to join this gathering because he is going to bring wisdom, deep, soulful wisdom to the conversation. I feel like this particular hermit has traveled a long path and gained much experience, and he is bringing soulful illumination into the world. And I think that he will be a nice balance of the conversation between the Queen of Swords, the King of Cups, and the Queen of Cups. And I would very happily spend some time with all of these people at a dinner party. Now, the very last question is, imagine offering advice to the tarot card you like the least. What would it be? I thought very hard about this one, and I've actually chosen the 6 of Swords. Now, in fact, I really like the 6 of Swords. I am very drawn to this image. In the 6 of Swords, we see a family moving away from the troubled waters into calmer waters, coming into respite. And that's a very appealing image, very appealing. especially as someone who has had to move very often, moved cities, moved countries repeatedly, moved continents. I feel this image very strongly, and I understand that feeling of going from one place to another, how hard it is, how overwhelming it can feel. And also the appeal of it, like the appeal of a fresh start, that you can go to a new place and kind of start over in the new place. That's very appealing, and yet it's also deceptive because you don't really ever have a fresh start. You bring your swords with you, your memories, yourself, the issues that you had in the old place, you bring them to the new place. So the Six of Swords, it can offer a little bit of a false promise. You feel this respite, this seeking of peace. But if you look ahead in the story of the swords, it's not good things lying ahead. You know, the cards that follow are continuing the troubles. And so when I was thinking about this card, I was thinking about also on a more sort of day-to-day level experiences of anxiety. So I can feel quite anxious in certain situations, and it's often tempting to then turn away from those situations and try to avoid them, rather than going into the situation that makes me feel anxious. So for example, speaking of moving to different countries, maybe it would make me stressed and anxious to have to do an important interaction in a language which I don't feel comfortable in, that I don't feel completely in control of. This is stressful. It's a stressful experience. If I don't do it, then I avoid the stressful experience. I shut down that anxiety. But what actually happens is I haven't confronted this thing that I do need to do, and the world has become a little bit smaller. The comfort zone which I'm willing to live in has become smaller because I haven't seen that I can cope with that situation. If you go into it and you cope with it, then you realize perhaps it's uncomfortable, perhaps it makes you anxious, but you can deal with it. If you don't, then it continues to seem very fearful, and like your body is telling you that was a scary situation. It's good we didn't do that because that's what kept us safe, not doing the scary thing. So anxiety is a very difficult emotion to navigate. It's one that I have to give a lot of thought to, because there are often situations in which I know it's going to make me anxious, and I have to make a choice whether or not I'm going to do that thing. And sometimes it's necessary not to do the thing. You know, sometimes that interaction is making you anxious for a good reason, and it would be better not to do it. On the other hand, there are interactions which it would be better to go forward and do. And so the reason I picked this card is to remind myself not to run away from situations that make me anxious, but to recognize the truth of the situation, to find sometimes this energy, or you know what, why not this energy as well, the kind of open-hearted energy of the star. There are different ways of dealing with these anxiety-provoking situations, and I picked the Six of Swords to remind myself to practice discernment, to recognize when it's good to turn away into peacefulness, and when it may be better to recognize my own strength and my own capacity to deal with the situation in a way that expresses strength, whether that's the strength of kind of open-heartedness and willingness to be vulnerable, willingness to give, and whether that's a situation that actually requires boundaries and clear communication and ability to even be authoritative where necessary. So having said that, I don't want to kind of oversimplify the Six of Swords. I do find this image to be, like I said, very evocative. It's a very beautiful piece of artwork as well, and it can have different meanings in different contexts. This is just some thoughts which I had around the Six of Swords and the question of anxiety, and exercising discernment to know when it's better to turn away from a situation and when it's better to lean in and try to experience capacity, to try to experience being capable of dealing with the situation. So these 10 questions have really given me a lot to think about. I've really enjoyed taking this journey with Soul Shadow Museum and other YouTubers talking about tarot. I will link her original video down below, and also the video from The Waves of Your Soul as well, which I really recommend listening to if you haven't already. I'll leave all the questions down below, so I'd love to hear your thoughts in response to those questions as well. I hope that you've enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me here, and I wish you well wherever you are, and I hope to see you again soon.